Gutavach, Shavua Tov, Parshas Yitro, the ger in every parsha. This one was a no-brainer. I could pick anything, really. The parsha was named after a ger, so that's already something. Obviously that has to do with Abraham being the progenitor of all the Jews and being the reason for the creation, because his descendants were going to accept the Torah. So I could go that route, but I found an interesting Orach Chaim, and I want to share it because it's really beautiful, and I think we could learn something very significant from it. And it's on the pasuk Shem Ha'echad Gershom, that the name of the one son was Gershom. Gershom is a contraction of two words, which we get the explanation because it says, "For he said, I was a stranger in a foreign land." So, let's see what the Orach Chaim says here. It says, "It was necessary to give the reason for Gershom's name a second time, even after writing it in Parshas Shemos." So, it's actually in Parshas Shemos, chapter 2, verse 22, and we're going to look at that and what the Orach Chaim says over there also, because it's significant. "So that you will know that this is the same Gershom who is mentioned in Parshas Shemos, and not another son who was given his name." And then he gives another explanation. He says, it is also possible that the Torah was concerned that someone might invent a different reason for the name and say that the real reason Moshe called his son Gershom was that Yitro had banished Moshe, Gershoi, which apparently means banished, from his table or from his house, which was completely untrue. So, there's a lot of midrashim. It's very interesting if you actually mine all the Megadata and the commentaries and stuff, and what really happened between Yitro and Moshe, and how is it that Moshe could marry the daughter of a big idol worshiper. So most of the commentators say that Yitro actually converted before Moshe married his daughter. And we see that that's the case in that the shepherds were shooing away the daughters from the well. So he had already been ostracized from his community, and he was the priest of Midian. So he was like a ruler in Midian, as Rashi brings down as one of the interpretations of Kohen Midian. So it was... There's a midrash that talks about Yitro made a condition with Moshe that he should raise his first son by idol worship, according to idol worship. So this is misunderstood, and it is, some people think, Moshe would marry an idol worshiper, and then he would actually acquiesce to allowing his son to be raised in the ways of idol worship. It just doesn't make any logical sense. So basically what it comes out to is that that Yitro made a claim to Moshe, and he said, "Listen, I was able to come to the Eibishter through all these ways of idol worship, so I want your firstborn son to do it the same way that I did it. And he'll be able to come to the Eibishter, but he's going to have to come through the Chachmas Umas Oilam. He's going to have to come through the wisdoms of the idol worshippers, and what the things that they... By learning these things, you're going to learn what not to do and what's not available." Actually, there's a Gemara that talks about all the Tanaim had to learn these things also in order to be able to paskin about them, and so on and so forth. So, this is an interesting concept. So he says... He says that it was possible that Yitro had shoot him away from the table, and he says that's completely not true. Why is that completely not true? According to the opinion that Yitro had already converted. So it says, although Moshe clearly stated that the reason for this name was, "I was a stranger in a foreign land," people might argue that perhaps he said this only so that Yisro would not grasp his true intent and be offended. Therefore, the Torah repeats the reason here, to reaffirm Moshe's words in a context where there is no concern that the meaning is being altered for fear that Yisro will grasp his intent. This confirms that the true reason the name of the one was Gershom is as follows, for he had said, I was a stranger in a foreign land. So he goes on to say, with regard to the explanation of what the verse means to imply with its phrase, for he had said, I was a stranger, I have already explained that in Parsha Shemos 2:22. So, if we go over there, we're going to see something else he says, which is very beautiful. This is, again, over in 2:22, it says, she gave birth to a son, and he named him Gershom, for he said, I was a stranger in a foreign land. So the Or HaChaim picks up on something interesting, and he says, Ger Hayisi, she gave birth to a son, and he named him Gershom, for he said, I was a stranger in a foreign land. Seemingly, Moshe should have said, I am a stranger in a foreign land. So what's with this was? He's in Midian now, and he's saying I was. So he's actually referring, if you want to take it literally, to when he was in Egypt, he was in a foreign land, which is true because they weren't really they were goyim in Egypt, and that's brought down later in the Torah. We'll also get to that. So it says, although Moshe was currently a stranger in Midian, the clause I was a stranger is in the past tense. Because, so he gives an explanation here. He says, because the verse is speaking at the time the Torah was written down, at which time Moshe was no longer a stranger. Now, the Or HaChaim says because he was speaking at a time later on when the Torah was written down. And then the commentary by the Art Scroll writes in, at which time Moshe was no longer a stranger. But this is erroneous because for sure, if he was a stranger in Egypt and he was a stranger in Midian, then for sure he was a stranger in the wilderness. He wasn't at home there either. So obviously, I don't agree with that commentary at all in the slightest. And the reason is obvious why. So, and that's, again, not the Or HaChaim, that's the Art Scroll. So he says, alternatively, the verse means to convey the following idea. I was a stranger is to be understood along the lines of King David's statement in Tehillim 119:19. I am a stranger in the world. For the righteous people, the tzaddikim, are only like strangers in this world, as they never let themselves feel settled. They view this world merely as a passageway in which to prepare for their permanent home in the world to come. That is what Moshe meant to say. I have always been a stranger, because this world is but a temporary dwelling place, and I now have an added sense of being a stranger, for I am in a foreign land. And Moshe considered Midian a foreign land because he was away from his brethren and his father's home. So what do we learn from this? Something very interesting. That there is something about a ger, which is a state of mind, that has nothing to do with a place, or it has nothing to do with being around the wrong people. If you, in your mind, feel like you're a stranger and you're not part of that place and you're just passing through and you're not making a permanent abode there, then obviously you were in the mindset of a stranger. And this is why God told the Yidden, the Jews, when they were in Israel, that you are goyim with me in the land. Meaning even in the land of Israel, which was given to you by an inheritance. You are goyim there, and there is something that of the mindset of a ger that you need to have in the land, and God is reminding you of that. And we're constantly reminded that with other mitzvahs also. Sukkot is a perfect example of that, which also has to do with the goyim. So, I want to bring up one last Rashi about when Yitro heard what had happened to the Jews. It's a splitting of the sea and the war of Amalek. And Rashi says over there, what did he hear? that about the splitting of the sea. He said when he heard about the splitting of the sea and the destruction of the Egyptians, he got goosebumps. And he quotes a saying from Rav, and some say Rav Papa, from I believe it's Sanhedrin 94a. I'll double check that and make sure that's it. And Rashi says over there that you are not allowed to speak disparagingly about goyim or bad about goyim in front of any Jews that have gerim in their family tree up to 10 generations back. And it just so happens to be that Yitro was 10 generations removed from Mitzrayim, because his where he came from, Midian, he was a Midianite. Midian was the son of Abraham and Keturah, and Keturah was Hagar, and Hagar was a Mitzri woman. So we see, because gerim are nogela to goyim, that we're sensitive about them because we have family members that are goyim. Fathers, mothers, maybe children, sons, daughters, maybe brothers, sisters, siblings, people that love us and we love also. And when you go talking smack about goyim and you just trash them and you say the worst things about them, like they don't have a soul and they're worse than animals and they don't have a divine soul and they have no free will, when you say this kind of stuff, it does nothing but cause, it vexes the ger. And this is what Rashi is talking about. So you have to think about it logically. You don't know any Jew that might not have gerim in its family tree up to 10 generations ago. So you should pretty much just shut up and don't say anything bad about goyim, period, at all. You know, it's like my goyish mother used to say, if you ain't got nothing good to say, don't say anything at all. Just keep your mouth shut. Keep your lips closed. It's one of the easiest things to do. Not everything that comes to your mind needs to be expressed by the tongue. So, you know, once we start looking with the good eye, I was speaking to an older chassid. I was at a Sheva Brachos today for Shabbos, and I was telling him that we need to start looking at goyim as potential Jews. And if you start looking at them like that with a good eye, then you're going to see the world in a whole different light. You have to change your perspective. And that's, you know, what Hillel was able to do that Shammai wasn't able to do. And Shammai would keep them from underneath the wings of the Shekhinah, but it was only Hillel who brought them in. Why? Because he looked at them with a good eye. Even though their Tanai for conversion was not a valid Tanai, he still converted them because he knew that deep down inside, their Tanai was really from a source of goodness. And that was with the good eye he saw that, not with the bad eye, not with the evil eye. And so we have to look with the good eye at the world and see the Tzelem Elokim. And I think when we start doing this, we're going to see a real change. The world's going to be a different place. And that I know for sure. So thanks for listening. This is a Ger in every Parsha.